Ready to Love returns with its ninth group, and I would say it seems that the casting people have decided to find people who are a little bit less dramatic. But whether or not they found enough people who could finally give us three final couples that actually last past the reunion, it's a little too soon to say. So to start the recap, unlike past seasons, not only do we not get anybody that seems dramatic and basically here to start their reality TV career, but also we don't get people who are shy or seem kind of out of place considering what most men who come on the show, most women who come on the show like. There isn't somebody who is very short as a man, who, of course, easily can get kicked out no matter how good their personality is. And in terms of women, yes, we do get a big girl in form of Janelle, but she seems to be someone who has enough personality, enough vivaciousness that the men seem to like and really appreciate her being there. But that's not to say that there aren't some people who you may question a little bit why they cast them. Like, for example, there's this gentleman named Brandon who has, I believe, 4 kids, recently divorced, as in 6 months ago, and on top of that, he's divorced twice from the same person who was with for 10 years. That's a lot of baggage, and while it's recognized that anybody past 30, especially going toward their 40s, maybe in 50s, has baggage, you and I both know when it comes to Ready to Love, being divorced, having kids, perhaps not wanting kids, those are major factors in how attractive you may be on this show to fellow cast members. So with him, he got a few issues that may not work out. He's not alone though. There's a gentleman named Marvin who is not only an erotic author, which is enticing to some, but he's also a dom in some spaces. Specifically, he works out of his apartment, which is a little bit weird, but that's his business. And when it comes to some of the more conservative people, like Tequila, and maybe even Leanne, she might be conservative in some ways. You can see maybe not their bag, but at the same time, Ready to Love is just as much as showing that black people are a monolith and also giving us a sense of diversity, while also trying to have these people try to find love with each other. With that said, this show is a competition show, so it's not us watching for maybe like 10 or so weeks while this group of 18 people get to know each other and you see some people just kind of fade out to the background and maybe self-eliminate. That's not this show. Every week somebody has to go, and for the first episode, it's a mixture as usual, and one man has to go, and the women are first. Now, amongst all these women, honestly, most don't really stand out that much. For one, it is episode 1, and 2, they're nice and they don't really show anything that could really raise a red flag. I mean, yes, between Leanne and Tequila, those two either don't make an impression on a man or rub them the wrong way. Like, for example, Leanne was speaking to this man named Maria. These names are very foreign to me as someone from the Northeast. And he's talking about his dad who passed away and his relationship with him and how he's trying to replicate that with the relationship he has with his son. And Leanne is just not all there. And I'm not saying like she's or something like that, but she seems to be listening. She seems to be engaged, but she's not reciprocating in a way that Maria believes means she's actually understanding the situation and is emphasizing or my vocabulary and everything is kind of messed up today. But anyway, point is, she's not connecting with him in a way that makes him feel like feelings are being reciprocated. So her trying to compare his dead dad, who he was close to her mentioning her dog, turns him all the way off. And most of the men, with her mentioning astrology and all that, they find it cute, but they don't find it something that makes them want to partner up with her. As for Tequila, it seems honestly, by the way this episode ended, that they had to find 2 women to put in the bottom 2, and she got sacrificed just because somebody had to be at the bottom with Leanne, who ultimately gets eliminated, much to her shock. Which leads to the men. For the men, My assumption was going to be that was going to be Brandon and perhaps Red, who is a DJ and comedian, or else Marvin, who's an erotic author, and Dom to be in the bottom. But it actually ends up just being Brandon and also, what is his name? And also a gentleman named Habibi. Now, the reason why Habibi is in the bottom two isn't because he has a bunch of baby mamas, kids, any of that. It seems to be because the women don't take him seriously because he's traveled a bit. He's someone who's not as serious as the other men. And it seems that makes him less attractive in a way. I mean, from what I'm seeing, he has personality. He seems cool, but I wasn't there to say what went down or not. But either way, women put him at the bottom, and unfortunately, this episode ends on a cliffhanger, so we don't know whether him or Brandon got kicked. But the way things seem, if one goes, the next one's probably gonna follow right after them, unless somebody says or does something stupider, or rather says or does something stupid that makes them move toward the bottom. So, in terms of my predictions, I definitely think Brandon's going to be the first one to go because 4 kids, recently divorced from someone you've been off and on with and got married to twice. I don't think most of the ladies are going to be able to wrap their heads around that and accept it, so he's probably going to be the first to go. So, following him, I think, could be Habibi for... I think that there's something that's happening off camera that the show's not really letting us see that probably is rubbing the ladies the wrong way. And granted, when what we actually got to see, he did show that he's very much into telling his story, talk about his love for playing the saxophone and stuff like that, but it didn't seem like it was a terrible red flag. But we can't forget that there are 8 other men that these ladies could talk to, and if you're the least interesting one or else the one that's not chasing them the most, that can be a problem and lead to you potentially getting the boot. As for who I think of the women maybe kick next, I think after being in the bottom 2, Tequila isn't one of those types who, with being in the bottom 2 and one of the first in the bottom 2, she's breaking down and getting desperate, but I think she's gonna potentially hit her stride. 2 of the men speak with her, they kind of raise her up a little bit, help her boost her confidence, so she might be fine. But I do think potentially for Sierra, who seems nice and all, but I feel like she could potentially be the next one up, and not because we've been given any real reason to, since unfortunately with both the men and women, sometimes there are certain cast members who kind of go under the radar, and then toward the middle or end of the show, that's when they start being featured prominently. But right now, Sierra seems like the one that focused on the least, so either she's going to be under the radar and stay and then start to gain a personality and some type of background toward the end or middle, or else she's going to be next one out because the men see as much in her as viewers do, and so not because she's a bad person, but just because she's not really stimulating, off she goes. Now, as for endgame couples, right now, there's no instant matches really, or people who you already want to root for, but I will say Janelle and Herbert's just a chill guy. There's really nothing notable to say about him, but I do think that they had a nice little thing going when they was in conversation, and they could potentially be one of the 3 remaining couples when the season ends. So the highlight for me is that there's really no major red flags right now. Casting wise, it seems like they haven't spread out the ages as much as they usually do, and they kind of kept a little bit more compact between early 30s and about early to mid 50s, if even mid 50s at that. So it's less of almost a feel of we have multiple generations on one show. On top of that, I think look-wise, they kept it where, yes, there's some guys and girls who got a little meat on their bones, but pretty much you don't got any skinny minis who look like they're early 20s still. Everybody looks grown. No matter if you talk about men or women, everybody looks grown. And on top of that, yes, some people are showing little signs of quirks, but nobody seems like they're gonna be made strictly to be someone entertaining for us rather than somebody who could potentially find a partner on this show. But it's episode 1, so anything can potentially happen. But right now, even as a cynic when it comes to this show, I feel like with changing the location and maybe changing the type of people they're trying to have on the show, things are a little bit more calmer and less of a red flag than what we're used to. With that said, off the bat, I feel like we don't really have any instant endgame couples. And yes, we did mention Janelle and Herbert as a potential one, but that's based off of one scene. We don't see anybody that really gets like googly eyed or has the kind of conversation where you kind of feel envious or any type of thing like that. Pretty much what we have is a lot of attractive people who have potential to like one another, but even with no one being shy, most people being at least ambiverts, I can't say that this is, at this point, the type of season where you're going to feel that the ship is finally starting to steer in the right direction fully. I think right now it's still trying to turn a little bit. While you always have to remain cautious when it comes Ready to Love, especially as it struggles to live up to its name, I do think that it still has some desire to show us not only black love, but also love past 30. And maybe as it goes deeper to the south, especially toward the west, instead of focusing mostly on the southeast and starting to move slowly up the mid-east coast, maybe, just maybe, it can finally fulfill its purpose rather than just provide entertainment and make people either glad that they're not single or make them think that they're doomed.